Dr. Ayesha, we are delighted to have you here at NASSCOM Product Conclave. You're one of the most prominent leaders in the world of AI today. And I believe your PhD thesis was on the topic of smart cities. So my question is about smart cities to begin with. What's the state of the art as far as smart cities are concerned? And what are some of your lessons about smart cities, especially in Singapore and other model cities that you've studied or worked on?
That's a really good question, Srikanth, and thank you for having me on this fireside discussion. So smart cities, when they started off about 10, 15 years ago, the idea was that it would be the operating model of one city, that it would be completely controlled by a particular government or a particular company, like a big behemoth. But then over time, they realized that cities don't work that way, that in fact, you need these public-private partnerships in which you need the government, whether it's a transport sector, education sector, or others, to work with the private sector and in collaboration address the big challenges that we have, especially in emerging markets related to efficient transportation, efficient and better security, obviously in education as well. And then it evolved even further. And now the current iteration is that technology is the underlying factor of a smart city, but it's not about technology. It's about citizen-centric problem solving. So that is very important. In Singapore, we have an aging population. Not only do we outfit all the apartments for elderly with all kinds of sensors and IoT so that we know if they fell down, but we also situate those apartments in the middle of a thriving ecosystem of universities, playgrounds, preschools, so they're not lonely when they come out. And most elderly people die of loneliness. So I think the idea is, what is the combination, multidisciplinary combination of urban designers, technologists, policymakers, data scientists that together make a citizen-centric smart city?
And within that, you talked about public-private partnership. Is there an ideal model for the public-private partnership? Is there some leading examples that, let's say, cities in India could learn from?
Well, I think there are lots of examples for that. And in Singapore, we see that Infocom Media Development Authority, which is the architect of the digital economy of Singapore, they spend a lot of time first piloting an idea. So for example, they're trying to streamline, because we are a port, they're trying to streamline and create smarter ports in Singapore. And they are working with 4 of the largest commodity traders and banks in Singapore to develop a blockchain-based solution where they can actually track the shipments much better. There's more transparency, accountability, and efficiency. This TradeX pilot is then going to be used and handed over potentially to the private sector or to some players in that to build the infrastructure, and the government role then becomes to govern it. So a lot of these digital infrastructures are started off because there's very little incentive for companies to invest in these smart city prototypes right in the beginning when it's not obvious what the economic benefit to them will be. That's very important. At that time, the government comes in. And once the project is underway, then the other thing is, how do you govern it to make sure data is secure and to make sure that it remains in the interest of the population and there are no monopolies. But I think that's an amazing opportunity for entrepreneurs across the emerging markets to focus on such smart city solutions with the government.
So one of the things that you briefly touched upon while you were describing this is data and
yes.
Maybe ownership of data. I mean, smart cities are going to be built on a very solid data infrastructure and intelligence on top of that. So how do you balance the need for smarts, intelligence, which will come from data, and over concerns with privacy and surveillance? Because there are cameras everywhere. Already we see some of the leading cities in the world have way too many cameras guiding everything. And this is smart cities are going to take it to the next level. So how do you make sure that the AI and the data is responsibly used? And secondly, how does the sharing take place? Because what are the mechanisms by which we ensure that sharing is happening? Private players and others are looking at it, but again, not misusing it?
That's a fantastic question, Srikanth. And obviously, both of us are in the AI space. We deal with this on a daily basis. First of all, you have to start as a country or a city with principles. And in this sense, I'm a big proponent and advocate and supporter of the European Union's approach, both to data and to artificial intelligence. This sense of data dignity, and I really like that term, that you have to respect people, citizens, and there is a dignity to your ownership of your data, or at least your knowledge of where it is. So the rules around GDPR, which are now being adopted in various ways across countries, in terms of being able to see what the data is being used and in a transparent and easy to understand manner, then have the ability to opt in as opposed to opt out. So by default, you're not tracking somebody's data. The ability to be forgotten, which is so important, right? And we see that these are some of the underlying principles which are now being enforced with fines by the European Union. There is another sense of big multinational companies that you can't just take our citizens' data and then take it somewhere else. So in Toronto, a smart city was being built by Google's subsidiary, Sidewalk. And the citizens said, all these lights and cameras you have everywhere, you're going to take this data at the edge and you're going to move it to the cloud in some server farm in the United States. And that's not acceptable to us. So civic knowledge and activism, along with the principles that any democratic society holds dear, the combination of these will keep pressure on the different kinds of companies from abusing data. And of course, we're seeing in the US, the California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA, is even more aggressive in some ways. So then the question becomes, well, how are we going to do AI then? And well, there are a couple of things. First of all, you can have a lot of ways of anonymizing and still using the data. There's a whole new trend of using small data as opposed to endlessly gobbling up big data. There's also a way to transfer, especially if you get to, on the edge machine learning models. Already they are much more privacy positive in the sense that the model is updated by locally and then the model is sent back and it already has the updates in it. So I believe that instead of worrying about the technology, we should worry about the ethical principles we hold dear, and then innovation will follow. And that is already what we're seeing. We are seeing startups like in-country that allow you to seamlessly move data from one country to another and be in compliance between the Middle East and Bangladesh and India and the United States. So automated solutions will come out. And this is another great opportunity for entrepreneurs all over the world.
Yeah, the interesting thing you spoke about is federated learning, right? Which is privacy preserving, yet you can learn from on the edge from multiple different sources.
Exactly.
In the context of AI for smart cities or otherwise, what are some of the breakthrough AI applications in the context of smart cities, and maybe even broadly, what are some of the latest and greatest in AI that you're personally excited about?
I think there are two things that are very exciting. One is more immediate, which is natural language processing. So we saw a hockey curve explosion in image-related AI after the ImageNet classification was done. Since then, it's being refined, but now we see it's so much easier to do facial recognition. And of course, your company, Cure AI, is using it for identifying TB and other kinds of issues that are in radiology images. But natural language processing is now the next big thing. Natural language processing, natural language generation, and all of the innovation that's going to happen around that, in particular in voice commerce, in live streaming, and in robotics as well, and releasing human beings from this bureaucracy of typing things out and inputting things. So just to give you an example, insurance companies. So anyone who's had kids, we know that one of the things that any mom who's pregnant worries about is preeclampsia. So some of the projects that we do is that's the number one thing that pregnant women in some countries ask about. in the 8th or 9th month when they call customer service. Now, when they call customer service and they ask this, that there's some gentleman or some woman, young woman, doesn't have kids. Now they're looking through all the contracts, and even they don't even know what preeclampsia means. But the artificial intelligence can understand her concern, understand her emotions, and be able to give her an answer that is empathetic, precise, and is in alignment with the contract that she has. And that's just one very basic example, that we always read about more exciting stuff, but I think that's very exciting. And the next thing that's exciting is, how do we move away from deep learning and the huge requirement it has of massive computation and massive kind of data to small data and potentially entirely new forms of AI, which are symbolic, maybe in nature, and can kind of take us beyond mimicking routine prediction and maybe simulate human intelligence much more.
And you're building one of the really compelling AI firms today, right? As at ADDO AI, and doing some very interesting work. Love to hear a little bit about what you do at ADDO and the nature of clients and problems that you solve and geographies that you serve.
Right. And we're big fans of your company, Fractal Analytics. So thank you for that. So ADDO AI, we focus on number one, kind of organizing the data of enterprise companies. So even though the exciting stuff everybody talks about is artificial intelligence, data science to some degree is getting commoditized. But where people continue to struggle is just, where is their data? How do you build the engineering pipelines? What should be a modern data architecture? Should be a data mesh architecture, a centralized one? How should you govern this? What should be the semantic layer so you understand what your data is? And then, of course, there's this issue of compliance as well. So that is the majority of focus that we have. And around that, there are, of course, data architects, data engineers, data modelers, data governance specialists. And that is, we do that for very large clients. So some of the large telcos in Asia, we are working with very large hospital systems in Asia and the United States. And that, I believe, is the most important thing. You see, you can build a house and you can put all kinds of nice furniture in it. But if you didn't build a good foundation, it's going to collapse. And now, for the first time, since I started this company with my co-founder, we are seeing an interest. People are coming to us and saying, tell us about the data, this golden truth of data and how to build it. So that's the majority of our work. And then, of course, after that, we also have a lot of ML engineers and data scientists that can extract value from it. So, even though we're very geeky and very academic, we don't just do things for the sake of it. At the end of the day, you have to have a client, either application or a person, who is taking in this model and it's part of their workflow and it is increasing their efficiency, productivity, or entirely automating that task for them. So that's the kind of two things that we do.
Got it. And I looked up some of the profiles of your team, and there's some very impressive members in your team. I also see that you have a 100-member team in Pakistan, comprising AI engineers, data scientists, and data engineers, and so on. So I just want to understand, what is the STEM AI talent situation in Pakistan, and is it an emerging data science destination globally today?
It absolutely is. So I grew up in Lahore. My co-founder is in Lahore, and he leads this amazing team. And Srikanth, you've seen that young people these days are so much smarter than we are. They're out-of-the-box thinkers. There is this myth that we are an offshore hub in Southeast Asia or South Asia. But in fact, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Nepalis, we are very capable of being kind of board advisors, CEO advisors, and we continue to do that. And that combination of strong STEM education, because Pakistan also has a lot of top technical universities, combined with this kind of creative product design approach, is about being really a partner to your client wherever they may be in the world. And I think all our young folks should be thinking like that, really thinking about the problem. Even if you're a techie, when I came into techie, it was always like, give us the requirements. Like, stop asking for requirements wherever you are. You're more than capable of thinking and taking people down a path which is creative, innovative, and productive. And that is a talent I see across Asia, of course, including in Singapore and China as well.
So this is the NASSCOM Product Conclave, and we have the audience here is a bunch of entrepreneurs who are building world-class products, and that ecosystem in India is exploding as we speak. So I'd love to get your words of advice for people who are building Indian product companies that are serving the globe in the general area of SaaS and deep tech. And what would they should they do, and specifically how can they leverage the smart city opportunity that is so huge, at the same time may not be let's say exploding at the pace at which one expected, let's say 10 years ago?
Well, I think that one of the things that there are several hurdles that somebody needs to jump. And one of the hurdles that any tech firm tends to jump, and a lot of us tend to be techies, is that we are unable to articulate and communicate our value proposition well, whether it is to venture capitalists or just in terms of selling to our enterprise or consumer clients. So the tendency needs to be, because in the West, they're short of technical people, so their tendency needs to be to elevate engineers. In South Asia and Asia, we are we have a lot of tech talent. So where we need to educate our tech talent, our entrepreneurs, our founders, is the art of connecting the business problem with the technology solution, and then having a very iterative approach. So whether it is in services, Srikanth, like you and I, and you have products as well, or in products, this idea of consumer focus and constantly in hyper agile manner testing it is very, very important for scale. I know that there's a lot of money to be raised and people are raising a vast amount, but at the end of the day, keeping an eye on your bottom line is also important, because that is what determines your growth multiples as well, unless of course you need it to expand. So I think I have found that is the only problem, is communication skills sometimes amongst Asians, even though they have great ideas. In terms of smart cities, it's the same thing. You have an idea, it solves a problem, but you need the government support. So Dubai government, for example, Singapore government welcomes great ideas. So even if you want to do something for Egypt or India or even in the United States, you need to go to a city that is looking for people like that. So just for example, if you're using Web3 and you're thinking of crypto-based or blockchain-based solutions that you think would be awesome for India, but you're not finding a host city, then you could go to Miami or New York, where they're literally inviting people to do this experimentation in the city. So I would say think big, always think global from the start for opportunities. But in large countries in South Asia, the market, of course, is big enough to make a very big impact right there in your hometown eventually.
Oh, it's been wonderful chatting with you, Ayesha. Thank you for joining us at the NASSCOM Product Conclave, and all the best for building ADDO from here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here, Srikanth. Bye.